Well, you may be a little bit bummed out when you check your bank account. You're trying to figure out how you're going to pay for college for little Aiden, Jaden, and Braden, who you're raising. But I have great news for you. You have already paid for the college of others. Now, granted, they appear to be scumbag terrorists, but hey, you paid for somebody's college. Joining me now, Benjamin Weingarten, editor-at-large of Real Clear Investigations. Okay, hey, Ben, have we been paying for terrorists to go to college in this country?
Paying for terrorists to go to college, paying for terrorists to be able to build their heroin businesses, to fund their jihadist efforts to take out Americans and our allies. And, as you were doing that intro, I was thinking the way to pay for your kids' college is to set up a democracy-focused NGO and then use the funds to underwrite their education. That's the way to do it.
God, it's just... I feel so filthy even discussing how horrible this system is. Okay, Ben, so for all the people who are a little confused on what we're talking about, break down some details. What did we discover today with the newest USAID discoveries?
Where to begin? There's so many different layers to the scandal of the $50 billion a year so-called independent, and I guess acting as an independent agency of the federal government. And I think the easiest way to think about it is, first you have the radical gender ideology and sexual perversion side of things, which is quote unquote LGBTQIA plus advocacy in countries all over the world, funding of course, chemical castration and hormone therapy, including for minors, I believe, in foreign countries, guides on how to keep yourself safe primarily in the Middle East, to the extent you're an LGBTQ advocate, so probably generating some resentment from foreign regimes. Then you get to the things like, to your point, hundreds of millions of dollars or more that have ultimately redounded to the benefit of the Taliban in Afghanistan, jihadi groups in Syria and beyond. Of course, the funding to the EcoHealth Alliance, which ultimately ended up in the Wuhan lab and contributed to the pandemic that destroyed our liberty, our finances, and beyond. And then beyond those disastrous efforts, I think, is the fact that this sort of colorful revolution type work and the funding of jihadists really diverts our gaze from the regime change kind of behavior that USAID has been behind for years. And, during the Cold War, when USAID was created, there was a soft power rationale. It was, you have to promote democracy in parts of the world that the communists controlled, to undermine them, contain them, and ultimately triumph over them. But the problem is essentially that today's Marxists took over USAID and all of these other institutions in the federal government and have used that to export their revolution abroad and really ultimately undermine us with our tax dollars. And the last point I'll make briefly is, this has basically been an administrative state that we have been funding via these NGOs, some foreign and some domestic, that serves as an extension of the government administrative state. Totally unelected, unaccountable, paid for with our tax dollars to spread left-wing radicalism around the world, and of course, line the pockets of the allies of our government here at home.
Good God, it's so gross. Ben, what about media organizations? At least tell me I haven't been going to work every single day and the government's sticking its filthy fingers in my wallet and handing it to media organizations who hate me. That hasn't been happening, right, Ben?
Got some bad news. Unfortunately for you, you've been funding primo subscriptions to Politico Pro and subscriptions to the New York Times and the AP and Bloomberg services and Reuters services and beyond. And amazingly, the gaslighting from these news outlets, who, as you noted, hate your guts, is that, well, look, government agents need to be able to read the vital information, much of which the government agencies themselves leak to these outlets, that they produce in their premium and paywalled content and beyond. And my view is, as perverse as it is that our tax dollars are paying for subscriptions for government agents to read obviously biased publications, of course, they're not funding any conservative outlets via these subscriptions. Even more perverse is that while on the one hand, they pay them off to some degree in millions of dollars in the case of Politico, for example, on the other hand, the government has also labored with hundreds of millions of dollars to create the censorship industrial complex that suppresses and seeks to destroy the business models of news and views from conservative and independent sources. That's a subsidy that's worth many, many times the amount that we pay through our tax dollars effectively for subscriptions to these regime media outlets that effectively do the regime's bidding by printing the narratives they want, serving as conduits for leaks from our intel agencies, for example, like the Russiagate hoax or the 51 intelligence officials saying that Hunter Biden laptop story has all the hallmarks of Russian propaganda, Russian information operation. Even more perverse is how they worked with these quote unquote anti disinformation, dis and malinformation NGOs to pressure the social media companies to censor people like you and me and news and opinion outlets that put forth dissenting views to basically silence the other side and prop up the regime media outlets. We haven't even begun to calculate how much that has been worth to them, but it's damaged the republic potentially to an irrevocable degree. And it's amazing, I would say, that despite all that, still we're basically a 50% plus one country.
It is amazing when you consider everything that's been stacked against us, and they still got their butts kicked in an election. All right, Ben, I've been trying to warn people that obviously USAID is horrible, maybe the worst of the worst. It's really, 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 really bad. But they haven't even gotten to the Pentagon yet. So far, what we've seen is just the tip. There is so much more coming, and people are going to be mortified at what they find in that building.
You're absolutely right. And to that point, people don't need to look any further than effectively the Inspector General, the CIGAR reports with regard to Afghanistan and the boondoggles there, and what we ended up funding and how we ended up undermining the mission to the extent there was a mission with any clear objectives there. Put Afghanistan, which was a massive boondoggle and ultimately ended in disgrace, put it on steroids, and that tells you where we get to with the Pentagon, not to mention, of course, the intelligence community and beyond. We've already heard that $100 billion are just missing. We have no idea with respect to Ukraine. So imagine across the entirety, to your point, of the Pentagon and the intelligence community, with the secrecy that's built into them definitionally, and then all the people who benefit from the misuse of these agencies, which are absolutely vital on their face to keep us safe, and which you served in. We can only imagine the corruption, the waste, fraud, and abuse, and how they've been used to undermine our interest and line the pockets of people here at home with our tax dollars. I'm sure the real fight's going to start there, and then, of course, with Medicare.
Oh gosh, God only knows what we're going to find with Medicare. All right, Ben. Before I let you go, Pam Bondi. I open up the show. I don't know her. I've never met her. I only know her by reputation. But does she have what it takes to get fangs and throw government people in prison? Not resignations and revoking security clearances. That's not near enough to stop the communist revolution from inside of our government. Do you think this woman has what it takes to send government people to prison?
I think Pam Bondi, along with Kash Patel, who himself, as he noted in his confirmation hearings, has been targeted by a weaponized and hyper-politicized national security and law enforcement apparatus. When you look at what they've put out in terms of the weaponization working group, so-called, that they've developed and what they're going to be probing, undoubtedly they are going to find myriad crimes there, including the very crime that Donald Trump himself was charged with, essentially taking away the rights of Americans under color of law. We've seen that on steroids to the hilt with all of these different weaponized prosecutors at the federal level and on down. So if they pursue the merits of the cases, and I believe they will, there have to be criminal charges. Anything else would further the injustice and further undermine our republic at the end of the day.
Yeah, no doubt. Ben, that was awesome, brother. Come back soon, please. Welcome anytime.
Thanks for having me.
I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.